Well, shalom, shalom. Welcome, world changers. Tonight we're going to be talking about Noah and Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Why Noah blessed Shem and Ham, and he didn't really say a whole lot about Shem, and Japheth, but didn't say a whole lot about Ham, but cursed Ham's son. Very interesting passage of scripture. We're going to talk about that. So, welcome everyone. As always, we have a couple comments. I have a couple comments I want to address, and also a critical thinking tip, as well as live music from Hannah. And before we get into the meat of this of the night tonight. All right, so I see here we have in the live chat, Calamentos says, shalom everyone. Shalom, Calamentos. We have Corey says, shalom, Brother Chris. Shalom, Corey. Welcome. Good to see you. Blessings. I pray that everything that we share tonight would be a great blessing to everyone that's listening, and will increase your knowledge of the scriptures, your knowledge of the things of heaven, and your relationship with God, for sure. Okay, let's get into the comments. The comments that I received. Actually, I got 3 different comments from 3 different platforms. So I want to address this first comment. This is a comment that I received on TikTok. All right. So this comment is from First Century Christian 1, saying, Paul was sitting at the feet of Gamaliel, but perhaps for half an hour. There was no time requirement. Thank you for your comment, First Century Christian. A little bit of context here behind this comment is, I commonly talk about Paul, and one of the things that I say about Paul is interesting is that it says in the book of Acts that he was basically Gamaliel was his rabbi, basically. Okay, and so we'll get into that passage in just a minute, but very interesting that in the book of Acts chapter 5 we have Gamaliel making a ruling. Now Gamaliel was one of the leaders of the Sanhedrin back in those days, the Sanhedrin being the Jewish court. And so Gamaliel would have been something like, the supreme justice or the chief justice, I should say, of the Supreme Court. And so Gamaliel made a ruling according to Acts chapter 5, and said, don't touch the Christians, just leave them alone. If what they're about, is of God, then, you don't want to be fighting against it. If it's not of God, it will just, it's nothing worried to be, nothing worthy of worrying about. It'll die off. And so Paul and Gamaliel. Now, if Paul was really had a relationship with Gamaliel the way it says it that he did, then why did Paul do the opposite to what Gamaliel ruled? Gamaliel ruled, don't touch the Christians, leave them alone, let them have their peace. And Paul did the opposite. He persecuted Christians unto death, it says, even by his own admission in his writings. But so we have here First Century Christian 1 saying Paul was sitting at the feet of Gamaliel, but perhaps for half an hour. There was no time requirement. Again, I appreciate this comment, and one thing I would highly recommend is that we don't try to make it work when it doesn't work. So the bottom line here is that First Century Christian, by the way, I like that name, says there was no time requirement, perhaps for half an hour. Well, you know what? Let's go over to the actual scripture itself, or let's go over to, just give me a second here. And we'll pull it up. So it's from Acts chapter 22, verse 3. And according to the author of Acts here, Paul, I believe it's Paul that's speaking, he says, I am verily, or I am truly a man which am a Jew, born in Tarsus, a city of Cilicia, yet brought up in this city at the feet of Gamaliel. Brought up in this city at the feet of Gamaliel. The way this is worded, the phraseology used here is if that he was raised pretty much by Gamaliel. He was brought up in this city by Gamaliel, at the feet of Gamaliel. So basically, according to the book of Acts, Paul claimed to have been, he claimed to be a disciple of Rabbi Gamaliel, if you will. So I mean, we can speculate. I don't think this is talking about half an hour. I think this is probably talking about many years, several years anyway. How else can you explain being brought up in a certain area at the feet of somebody else? So that's my take on that, first century Christian. Okay, so we have another comment here. So here's a comment from Getter. Pulled this comment up on Getter. This particular person says $10,000 USD. If you can make your fable appear and shake my hand, and not, if not, you should be quiet and stop spreading the lies called religion. And so there's some explicits there as well. Okay, so here's the deal. Let me pull up. And by the way, Mill Showman, I also have a challenge for you as well. Just give me a second here. Here's the deal. God is not as stupid. If you think that God is willing to do that, then you're making God out to be like a dog, okay? He is certainly not as stupid as many people are, okay? As some people would say, God is not, or he's not as stupid as you look. Okay, so Deuteronomy chapter 4 explains the reason why God will not do this. I mean, he's not a fool. So Deuteronomy chapter 4, we have Moses speaking to all of the children of Israel. Actually, you know what? Let me see how much we're going to read here. Let's do this. Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 1. This is okay, so these are the words of Moses to the children of Israel. Now, Israel, hear the decrees and laws I'm about to teach you. Follow them so that you may live. Okay, so this is salvation. By the way, if you don't do this, you are not alive. It doesn't matter how much you have vital signs, and you may be breathing and you may be healthy in the flesh, but you certainly are living a life of death. You are certainly living and existing in a very pitiful, horrible, empty state. Follow them so that you may live and may go in and take possession of the land the Lord, the God of your ancestors, is giving you. Do not add to what I command you, and do not subtract from it, but keep the commands of the Lord your God that I give you. You saw with your own eyes what the Lord did at Baal Peor. The Lord your God destroyed from among you everyone who followed the Baal of Peor, but all of you who held fast to the Lord are still alive today. See, I have taught you decrees and laws as the Lord my God commanded me, so that you may follow them in the land you are entering to take possession of it. Observe them carefully, for this will show your wisdom and understanding to the nations, who will hear all about these decrees and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. What other nation is so great as to have their gods near them the way the Lord our God is near us whenever we pray to him? And let me just go. Just quickly want to say this to that particular person who posted that comment. There is proof. I'm going to present to you proof here, okay? But no, God is not a God that's going to at your beck and call, that he's going to obey you as if you are his master, okay? He just doesn't do that. But let me just go on here. It tells you it tells you here why God does not show up in a form. It tells you exactly here. And apparently this particular person who left, this comment is very ignorant of why God does not show up in form. Okay, so moving on, it says, and what other nation is so great as to have such righteous decrees and laws as this body of laws I am setting before you today? Only be careful and watch yourselves closely, so that you do not forget the things your eyes have seen, or let them fade from your heart as long as you live. Teach them to your children and to their children after them. Remember the day you stood before the Lord your God at Horeb, and he said to me, assemble the people before me to hear my words, so that they may learn and to revere me as long as they live in the land, and may teach them to their children. You came near and stood at the foot of the mountain while it blazed with fire, to the very heavens with black clouds and deep darkness. The Lord spoke to you out of the fire. You heard the sound of words, but saw no form. Okay? Saw no form. He'll explain why in just a minute. God does not, he's not interested in showing up in a form. There was only a voice, it says here, verse 13. He declared to you his covenant 10 commandments, which he commanded you to follow, and he wrote them on 2 stone tablets. And the Lord directed me at that time to teach you the decrees and laws you are to follow in the land that you are crossing the Jordan to possess. You saw no form. Again, you saw no form of any kind. You saw no form of any kind the day the Lord spoke to you at Horeb out of the fire. Therefore, watch yourselves very carefully, so that you do not become corrupt and make yourselves an idol, an image of any shape, whether formed like a man or a woman, or like an animal, or on earth, or any bird that flies in the air, or like any creature that moves along the ground, or any fish in the waters below. When you look up to the sky and see the sun, the moon, and the stars, all the heavenly array, do not be enticed into bowing down to them and worshiping things the Lord your God has appointed to all the nations under heaven. But as for you, the Lord took you and brought you out of the iron smelting furnace, out of Egypt, to be the people of his inheritance, as you now are. The Lord was angry with me because of you. Okay, so he goes on here to explain. Okay, verse 23, be careful not to forget the covenant of the Lord your God, which he made with you. Do not make for yourselves an idol in the form of anything the Lord your God has forbidden. For the Lord your God is a consuming fire, a jealous God. Okay, so the reason why, as it says here earlier in verse 16, the reason why God does not show up in a form is because he knows enough that if he did show up in a form, somebody's going to make an image of him. and is going to bow down and worship that image. Idolatry is strictly forbidden. It is one of the most abominable practices anybody can engage in, and God hates idolatry. That's the reason why he doesn't show up as in a form. He shows up spiritually. Sure, he does. We have lots of people on earth. Mr. Mill Showman, we have lots of people on earth that have experienced God in a very life-changing way, including myself. Okay? We're talking about instant and complete transformation. Instant and complete transformation. I'm about to give you a challenge there, Mr. Showman, Mill Showman. Lots of people, myself included. God showed up. Okay? We've experienced him. We have experienced his power and his presence that instantly, keyword, instantly and completely set us free from drinking, smoking, sexual immorality, drug use, filthy language, and completely changed our heart. Completely changed our heart. There's no other power in the world that can do that instantly and completely. My challenge to you, Mill Showman, is to replicate the same fruit without God. Replicate that same fruit without God. It's worth more than $10,000, far more than $10,000. Take someone, do whatever you have to do. Do whatever you got to do. Make up a fable and cause that fable to change someone's life instantly and completely like the so-called fable changed my life. Take a person off the streets, completely, instantly and completely set them free from drinking, smoking, sexual immorality, filthy language, and completely change their heart. Not to mention substance abuse. Instantly and completely. I'm not talking about process. That's cheating. I'm not talking about, just quitting drinking and quitting smoking. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a full turnaround. I'm talking about a complete transformation. Happened to me. Happened to me. Well, I can't see God. Well, you can't see the wind either. And the wind does some things too. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. By the way, your very, very finite and corruptible human mortal eyes, you expect your little human eyes to be able to see the Almighty God? That's very foolish. Very foolish. But if you can replicate what God does, replicate it. If you can replicate it, talk about scientific, the scientific method. Let's do the scientific method. Replicate it. Okay? The scientific method proves God to be true. Replicate it. Take someone off the street who's, smoking a pack a day, an alcoholic, a drug addict, someone who's got a filthy mouth, someone who's got a lot of hate in their heart. I'm not talking about just disliking something, I'm talking about some serious stuff. Take someone like that and completely change them instantly and completely. Transform. That's happened to me. That's happened to many other people. If you can do that, Mill Showman, I'm going to join you. I'll be on your side. I will completely retract everything I just said. I will apologize to you publicly, and I will join your team. If you cannot replicate that, I suggest that you be quiet and stop spreading the lies called religion, because atheism is a religion as well. Okay? And I don't think that God would want to shake your hand, because who knows where your hands have been. Next comment, Corey Barton. Corey Barton. Now, this is a comment on figures of speech, metaphors in the Bible. This is what we did there on Shabbat a couple Shabbats ago, a couple Sabbaths ago, January 7th, and actually, as it says right here. And we mentioned some of the metaphors of the Bible. There are hundreds of, not just metaphors, I mean figures of speech. And so, Corey, you says to identify a figure of speech in the Bible is when Jesus says, take the log out of your eye before taking the speck out of another's eye. Excellent, 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 Corey. That's excellent. That's a good example. Really good example of a metaphor. Is it literally a log? It doesn't say like a log. It doesn't say like a log. It says a log. Take the log out of your eye. Is that what it means literally? No, of course not. Of course not. You take those principles that we spoke of on January 7th in that video, and you apply it. You say, yeah, that's certainly a metaphor. Now, you know what? Let me just, I didn't plan on doing this. I didn't plan on it, but let's just go on over to, because I posted some of it, not all of it, on ChristopherEnoch.org. Yeah, so we got this on ChristopherEnoch.org. How to identify a figure of speech in the Bible. If a concept is not testable, we must immediately file it under I don't know, because it could be literal, or it could be metaphor, or another figure of speech. If a concept is not feasible, possible, plausible, or compatible with that which can be proven by measurement, mathematical calculations, and reasoning to establish general rules or conclusions drawn from facts or examples, critical analysis, critical exposure to scrutiny, peer review and assessment, archaeological evidence, historical evidence, or any other body of hard evidence, then it must be rendered as either figurative or fiction, or an error such as a scribal error, or a deliberate change of the text, or simply the author was wrong. Any of these things can be possible. You know, for those who are familiar with what we talk about here, we talk about a lot of different contradictions in times when the author was wrong. Just because it says it in the Bible doesn't mean it's true. We've proven that many, many times over. Many, many times over. Okay? So we have to apply this kind of God's critical thinking skills here. We have to apply this kind of analysis. If the concept is not testable, just say I don't know. But if it is, if it's not feasible, if the say a certain verse, or again, there's literally hundreds of verses in the Bible that are figures of speech. And if any of those verses or concepts or phrases is not feasible, possible, plausible, or compatible with that which can be proven by measurement, mathematical calculations, reasoning, okay, and all the rest of this here, then it must be either rendered as figurative, fiction, or an error such as a scribal error or deliberate change of the text, or simply the author was wrong. So using this particular rule of judgment, we must, yes, Corey, you are absolutely correct. We must look at Jesus when he said, take the log out of your eye, as a figure of speech. It's a figure of speech, obviously. Why? Because it's not possible. It's not plausible. Okay? It fits many of those categories. All it has to do is fit in one, and it will be. We can say it's a figure of speech, but it fits many of those categories. So excellent, excellent example, Corey. Love it. Or quote, if your hand causes you to sin, cut it off. Unquote. Let's see here, Corey. You go on to say he's not really telling you to lay your hand on the chopping block and chop it at the wrist. Or when Jesus says, eat my flesh and drink my blood. That's another good example there. I know there might be somebody out there, as my grandmother would say, it takes all to make a world. It takes all kinds to make a world. There might be somebody out there that thinks that somehow, maybe Jesus was cannibalized. I don't know. But when he said, eat my flesh and drink my blood, I think most people understand that to be a figure of speech. Yeah. Yeah. And this is a thing with some Christians that say, well, Jesus said, eat, this is my flesh. It is my flesh, and this is my blood. And even that boils down to, okay, is it really, or is that a metaphor? Because Jesus didn't say, this is like my blood, this is like my flesh. He didn't say that. He said, this is my blood, this is my flesh. So once again, if any of you that are listening to this have not listened, if you weren't there on January 7th for that Shabbat video, highly recommend you go watch it, because we talk about many of these things. Yeah, excellent, Corey. So you say, Christians literally think Jesus wants us all to go over and actually eat him alive and drink his blood. It contradicts what God said in the Old Testament, where he said not to eat your own species. Yeah, and you're not. It's strictly forbidden. Cannibalism, strictly forbidden. So very, very good observation there, Corey. Bless you, bless you, bless you. All right, so critical thinking tip of the day. So let me just pull this up. Now, this is argument by assertion. This is very common, by the way. Argument by assertion. So the argument by assertion is the logical fallacy where someone tries to argue a point by merely asserting that it's true, regardless of contradiction. While this may seem stupid, it's actually an easy trap to fall into, and it is very common. Yes, it is very common. By the way, I'm reading from rationalwiki.org. Okay, so yeah, we deal with this all the time here. We've been dealing with this for how many years now, where people just make a statement. Like, for example, Paul's epistles are the word of God. Every single word of it is the word of God. For us today, every single word of Paul's epistles is God's word speaking to you today. Is God speaking to you today? So people make that kind of assertion. Every single word that Paul wrote is God speaking to you today. And I'm sorry for the sarcasm, but sometimes maybe I don't know, maybe I shouldn't be like this, but sometimes I'm a little bit sarcastic to try to nudge somebody to into reality here. It's like, okay, so if that's true, if every single word of Paul's letters is actually God speaking to you today, then you better go greet Priscilla and Aquila, because that's what he says to do. And you better go find his cloak that he left at Carpus and the parchments, because that's what he that's what he said to do, according to 2 Timothy. So yeah, that's just one example. We have to be very careful. A lot of, as this says, it's an easy trap to fall into. It's very common. But one thing we have to be very careful about is not just doing it ourselves, but also buying into someone else that does it. Sometimes we have people who, we listen to people, maybe people you might respect, and they would make a lot of assertions, and a lot of people just accept it as true. Well, just because someone says it doesn't mean it's true. Just because a leader says it, just because your pastor says it, or the Pope says it, or someone else says it, doesn't mean it's true. You have to test everything. You have to go, hey, you know what? You said it. Where's the evidence? Where's the evidence? Okay, so we're going to get into Hannah is going to play with for us here in just a moment. So, and afterwards we're going to come back and we're going to read Genesis chapter 9. And there's lots of stuff to talk about in Genesis chapter 9 alone. But one thing we're going to kind of hone in on, and that is the whole topic about why did Noah curse Canaan when it seems like Ham was the one who did him the wrong? The way it reads, the way it sounds in Genesis chapter 9, it sounds like Ham was the one who did the wrong, but his son got the curse. Why? What happened there? What's that all about? We're going to talk about that. So, so here's Hannah, and she's going to play for a few minutes here, and we'll be back to read that. Hannah? Yes, thank you, Hannah. Again, blessings to you. Thank you for blessing us once again. Thank you. All right, in the live chat, Shayla, blessings, blessings. I see we have, Shayla says, thank you, Hannah. And Billy says, shalom, shalom, Billy, welcome. Alan says, shalom, everyone. Shalom, Alan, welcome. And, oh, yeah, okay. Corey says, another figure of speech brought you out of the iron smelting furnace. Yes. And then the whole idea that, yeah, this is what people do with Jesus too, right? It's true. People make Jesus into an idol. I mean, you know, you have, the Roman, I know you got the whole thing going on, whether it's a statue or, it depends how people look at these inanimate objects, be it a statue or an icon or a painting, or even just our own imagination, how he looks in our own mind, or even just, let's take it even into the abstract, because a lot of people see Jesus as someone that I think he really wasn't. Like, for example, someone who is, who would never upset anybody, someone who was like just extremely passive in that sense. Yeah, he was passive, but I don't think there were, in a way, but I don't think he was as passive as a lot of people think. So, yeah, there's lots of ways that we can make those kind of images, graven images in a sense. And again, figuratively speaking, you can make a graven image as well as literally, for sure. Yeah, very good. Shayla says, I was an atheist my whole life till 3 years ago, so I understand why they might think that. Yeah, wow, that's amazing, Shayla. It's amazing. God has done some mighty things in your life. Awesome. Awesome. Shayla says, I know atheists can frustrate you, but remember it's God who gives people faith, not really something they can help. That's true. Yeah. Tammy says, shalom all. Shalom, Tammy. Welcome. Blessings to you and yours. Huh. Yeah, Alan, I was talking to a guy the other day. He said, we can't keep the law, so you know where this conversation went. Yep, I know where that conversation went. That's for sure. Yeah, Christ says, I didn't come to abolish the law. Christians say, yes, he did. Yeah, it's like, Christ said, don't think that I've come to abolish the law. So what do they think? Yeah. Corey as well says, thank you, Sister Hannah. Seek the Lord says, shalom, shalom, welcome. Corey asks a question, would I be correct? Now, I'm just trying to find, sorry, Corey, but just trying to find the context here. Corey, I'm sorry. Okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to find that one there, Corey. Yeah, like Alan, I didn't see where you there's a couple things you said, Corey, there, and I'm sorry, it's not clear to me which one you were talking about. Yeah, so Corey, if you could just help me clarify exactly which. There's a couple points you made. I just want to make sure I address the right one. In the meantime, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to read through Genesis chapter 9, and I'm trying to think if I should read through the whole thing or just go through it step by step and break, break it as I go. Maybe I'll read through the whole thing first. We'll get the entire context of it, and then we'll go back. I'll comment as well. We'll talk about it as we go anyway. Okay. All right. Let's do this. Genesis chapter 9, verse 1. Then God spoke to Noah and to his sons with him, saying, "And as for me, behold, I establish my covenant with you and with your descendants after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the cattle, and every beast of the earth with you, of all that go out of the ark, every beast of the earth. Thus I establish my covenant with you. Never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood." I think that's a really important little clause there that God put in there. Really, I think that's a really important clause because, hey, I mean, depending on how you read it, depending on your interpretation of the end times or the Bible prophecy of the future, most people would say that the Bible prophesies that the world will end, or as it says in 2 Peter, that everything will be consumed by fire. The elements will melt with fervent heat, and everything will be quote unquote dissolved, so to speak. So, you know what? Let's go there because it really fits this 2 Peter. It really fits this context. Second Peter chapter 3. Let's see. Second Peter chapter 3, verse 10, "But the day of the Lord shall come as a thief in the night, in which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise, and the elements will melt with fervent heat. The earth also and the works that are therein shall be burned up. Seeing then that these things shall be dissolved, what manner of persons ought you to be in all holy conversation and godliness, looking for and hasting unto the coming of the day of God, wherein the heavens being on fire shall be dissolved, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat." Wow. So, it appears that it's saying here that, and if you pull out some of the other portions of the scripture as well, let me just look into the cross references. It talks about the day of the Lord. Of course, Joel chapter 2 talks about the day of the Lord with the fire as well. Okay, in Joel chapter 2, and talking about the day of the Lord of hosts in Isaiah as well. So it seems like it's like, look at how God destroyed the earth with water in the days gone by, so to speak. And in the same way, as it says in 2 Peter, in the same way, by the same word, God reserved the earth to be destroyed by fire. So this whole thing here in Genesis chapter 9, verse 11, God promises never to cut off everybody again by the waters of the flood. So that clause there makes it possible for him to do it again by fire and yet not break this promise. Right? Never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth, as opposed to another kind of natural disaster. Verse 12, and God said, this is the sign of the covenant which I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you for perpetual generations. I set my rainbow in the cloud, and it shall be for the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. It shall be when I bring a cloud over the earth that the rainbow shall be seen in the cloud, and I will remember my covenant which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. The waters shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. Interesting, right? It doesn't say that something else would destroy all flesh. It just says never again shall water, the flood. Verse 16, the rainbow shall be in the cloud, and I will look on it to remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth. And God said to Noah, this is the covenant which I have established between me and all flesh that is on the earth. Now, you know what? This reminds me, every time, well, not every time, but often when I see the rainbow, I think about 2 Peter. I think about how, and I think about this here. I think about 2 Peter chapter 2. I think about Genesis chapter 9. I think about how it says in 2 Peter, Sodom and Gomorrah, and in Jude, by the way, as well, that Sodom and Gomorrah were just an example. It's just like a little appetizer of what is to come in the future. The destruction of, people will be consumed by fire because of their sin. And I think of that when I see the rainbow. I think, this rainbow represents God saying, I'm not going to destroy mankind again by water, but I will by fire. The rainbow is his promise not to destroy again by water, but every time I think about that, I think about how he will by fire, according to 2 Peter and according to Jude. So, verse 18. Now the sons of Noah who went out of the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And Ham was the father of Canaan. These three were the sons of Noah, and from these the whole earth was populated. And Noah began to be a farmer, and he planted a vineyard. Then he drank of the wine and was drunk, and became uncovered in his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father, and told his two brothers outside. But Shem and Japheth took a garment, laid it on both their shoulders, and went backward and covered the nakedness of their father. Their faces were turned away, and they did not see their father's nakedness. So Noah awoke from his wine and knew what his younger son had done to him. Then he said, Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants. He shall be to his brethren, and he said, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant. May God enlarge Japheth, and may he dwell in the tents of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant." And Noah lived after the flood 350 years. So all the days of Noah were 950 years, and he died. Okay, so here's the big question. So, I mean, years for myself. I'm not sure how you guys have, read and understood this. But if you read this without, hearing any other teaching or hearing anybody else, you just read just that at face value. To me, it sounds like Ham's the one who did something wrong, and somehow Ham's son Canaan got the curse. Well, why didn't his other children get the curse? He had 4 sons, and only Canaan is the one that picked up the curse. Why is that? Because Ham had more than just Canaan. Why was it that only Canaan got the curse, not the other ones? It's always, it's one of those things that just kind of stuck in the back of my mind, kind of like, I wonder what this is about. So Genesis chapter 9, and here is where it's very interesting, super interesting. If you go into, again, some of these Jewish commentaries on the topic. Okay. I'm going to pull up Safaria again. Give me a second here. Some very interesting things here. So Safaria on Genesis chapter 9, verse 26, or 25, excuse me. Maybe I should start before that. Yeah, there's so much here to talk about. Hold on a second. So let's start in verse 22. Ham, the father of Canaan, saw his father's nakedness and told his 2 brothers outside. Now, I just have to say, there are varying theories here of what exactly happened. So, according to Rashi, Ham, the father of Canaan, saw. Okay, so that's what Genesis says. But some of our rabbis say that Canaan saw it and told his father about it. And on that account, he is mentioned in connection with this matter and was cursed. So, okay, Rashi, according to Rashi here, he says it was Canaan who saw Noah naked, told his father about it, and that's the reason why Canaan was the one that bore the brunt of the curse, not Ham. Okay, now moving on here. Here's the thing right here. And he saw his father's nakedness. Now, according to Rashi here, it says some say that he castrated him, and some say that he sodomized him. Now, and that's found in Sanhedrin chapter 70a. Sanhedrin 70a, if you want to look that up. I'm not going to go into all that, but that's basically what it says there in the I suppose that would be the Talmud. I can't not that familiar with Sanhedrin, but yes. So there's a theory that he either castrated him or worse, or sodomized him. So going on here, moving on with what Rashi says. Now there are other Jewish commentaries that say something different, a little bit different. So it says here, so where it says, and Shem and Japheth took, like Shem and Japheth took a cloth, okay? Literally, it says, and Shem took and Japheth. Okay? It is not written here, and they took, but and he took, in order to teach regarding Shem that he devoted himself to this duty with more eagerness than Japheth. Therefore, have Shem's sons received the privilege of wearing the cloak that has fringes, and the sons of Japheth were privileged to receive honorable burial. As it is said in Ezekiel chapter 39, verse 11, quote, I will give unto Gog, a descendant of Japheth, a place fit for burial in Israel, unquote. But as for Ham, who despised his father, of his descendants, it is said in Isaiah 20, verse 4, so shall the king of Assyria lead away the captives of Egypt and the exiles of Ethiopia. These were peopled by the children of Ham, young and old, naked and barefoot, and with buttocks uncovered, it says here in Genesis Rabbah, chapter 36, verse 6. And, okay, so another phrase here in Genesis 9:23, it says, and their faces were backward. So Rashi says, wherefore it is written a second time that they turned themselves backward. So why does it say this twice? It is to tell us that when they came near to him, it was necessary for them to turn around in order to cover him. They kept their faces turned away. And that's, again, expounded upon in Genesis Rabbah 36:6. So his younger one, the younger son, unworthy and despicable one, this is Jeremiah 49:15, for behold, I make you among the nations and despised. I make you small among the nations and despised among men. Okay. By the way, it's commonly believed that Ham is not the younger son of Noah, but in that culture and in that day, a grandson is called a son. A great grandson is called a son, and so on and so forth. It doesn't matter how many generations down the line, it's still a son, according to this particular way of thinking in this culture. Just like how, even today, it's like Father Abraham, right? It's like, are you Abraham's children? Is Abraham your father? So it doesn't matter how many generations have passed. If Abraham is your great times 50 grandfather, then he's still just your father and you are his child. And so that's the way it's viewed regarding Canaan as well, that Canaan was called the younger son of Noah, but he was, in all actuality, he was a grandson. Moving on here, again, this is Rashi. We got a couple more to go through. Cursed be Canaan, okay? So Rashi says, you have brought it about that I cannot beget a fourth son to serve me. Cursed, therefore, be your fourth son. See chapter 10, verse 6. Well, let's do this. Let's see chapter 10, verse 6. Genesis 10. Okay, the sons of Ham were Cush, Mitzrayim, Put, and Canaan, right? So there's four sons of Ham, and only one of them, Canaan, apparently the youngest one, but again, I know that there is a theory that Canaan was actually the oldest one, but yet called the youngest son of Noah, because at the time he was the youngest of all of them, because there was no child that was younger than that, from what I understand, no grandson anyway. So, okay. So, therefore, your fourth son to serve under the descendants of these elder ones, upon whom the duty of serving will be, upon whom the duty of serving me will devolve from now on. Why did Ham maltreat him in this manner? He said to his brothers, quote, Adam Harishon, had two sons, and one killed the other in order that he might possess the whole world. Genesis Rabbah 36, verse 7. Our father already has 3 sons, and he wishes to have yet another. Okay, let's go on over to a different commentary. So Sforno, this is a different commentary, Jewish commentary. It says, according to Genesis chapter 9, verse 22, that he saw the shameful deed his son had done to his father Noah when he had castrated him, according to some of our sages in Sanhedrin 70. According to the historian Barusi Hakaldai, compare Genesis 6 and 9, Canaan castrated his grandfather not surgically, but by some means of sorcery. His father Ham watched his son involve the witchcraft without protesting or trying to stop him. Disgrace, shame is also called nakedness. Compare with Ezra chapter 4, verse 14. Quote, "It is not right that we should see the king being disgraced," unquote. Also in Deuteronomy 21:4, the expression does not refer to either literal nakedness or to sexual licentiousness or incest, but refers to a disgraceful thing. Even when only covering their father, they walked with their faces averting their eyes from him. It would have caused them additional grief to behold their father in such a state. His being in a position of dependence to his senior brothers was merely natural and would not have been a special curse, especially in view of his disgraceful conduct. Solomon paraphrased this in Proverbs 11:29 when he spoke about, he said, quote, "A fool is a slave to the wise-hearted." Okay. Now there's something else here really interesting. I'm not sure how you pronounce this. Kiskuni. Another Jewish commentary says, he said, "Cursed be Canaan." Concerning Canaan, the prophet Joel said in Joel 4:8, quote, "And they will sell them to the people of Shiva, to a far distant nation," unquote. The slaves will in turn sell the Canaanites to an even more degrading status. Ham sinned, and his son Canaan was punished. Why? Seeing that God had already blessed Noah and all of his sons, Noah's cursing Ham would have been totally ineffective. So Noah didn't curse Ham. He couldn't curse Ham because he already blessed him. So that's why he didn't curse him. He already had the blessing of Noah. So compare what God said to Balaam, when he had told him that seeing that the Jewish people had already been blessed by him, Balaam, could not undo this by cursing them. Numbers chapter 22, verse 12. Some commentators say that actually Ham had not done anything. He had only viewed the exposed body of his father and had failed to cover him, as did his brothers subsequently. However, he had told others about it without intending to cover his father. Had he intended to cover his father, why did he tell his brothers about what he had seen without at least first having covered his father's shame? This is why Noah cursed him when he found out. These commentators cite the line, quote, "what his younger son had done to him," unquote, as proof of their interpretation, since the son's name had already been mentioned at the beginning of the paragraph. There was no need to repeat it. The word does not refer to the youngest son of Noah, seeing that Ham was not Noah's youngest son, the eldest being Japheth, and the youngest being Shem, as already pointed out earlier. Noah blessed the two sons who had treated him as was proper, whereas he remained silent concerning Ham. Canaan, who had shamed him, he cursed. Cursed be Canaan. He cursed him by referring to his name, meaning that his very name, which indicated something negative, suppressed, downtrodden, should become his curse, and he would become subservient to his brothers. Whenever a servant does not carry out the wishes of his master, he attracts a curse to himself. Quote, "he will become a slave to slaves," unquote. His fate will not be determined by warfare, but when the Jewish people would conquer the land of Canaan, they would be instructed not to let any Canaanites survive on that land. Deuteronomy 20, verse 16. Isn't this interesting stuff? This is interesting stuff, isn't it? Okay, so according to Da'at Zenim, another Jewish commentary, Noah said, Canaan be cursed and become a lowly slave to his brothers. Our sages in Bereshit Rabbah, or Genesis Rabbah, chapter 36, verse 7, state that already when Noah entered the ark, he had been upset that he did not have a young son who could perform for him many chores, that it had now become his task to perform personally. He therefore had resolved that when he would sire more children after leaving the ark, he would train some as his servants. Upon hearing him say something of that nature, his grandson Canaan went ahead and castrated him to prevent him from having more children. Noah therefore decided to treat Canaan as if he had been his fourth son, and decreed that he should become a servant to his brothers. If you were to ask why he cursed Canaan more than any one of Ham's other children, a question which is justified according to the opinion that it had been Canaan who had castrated him, Canaan could not have been even 1 year old when Noah left the ark, so that Noah must have failed to impregnate his wife until he had grown up. How do we answer the problem according to the opinion that it was his son Ham and not his grandson that had castrated him? A sage by the name of Rabbi Aaron found a midrash that Ham had discovered his father in a state of nudity and told his brothers about it in a derogatory manner. And he had been overheard by Canaan, who had decided to castrate his father. This is the meaning of the puzzling words, what his son, the minor, had done to him. Chapter 9, verse 24. Grandchildren are often referred to in the Torah as if they were children, not grandchildren. Actually, the line could not have referred to Ham, as he was not Noah's youngest son, as the Torah lists him as his middle son in Genesis chapter 10, verse 1. The Torah, in referring to Canaan as Noah's youngest son, meant his grandson. At that time, he only had one grandson, so that he did not have to be named. We find proof that grandsons may be called younger sons in Obadiah chapter 1 verse 2. Quote, "Here I will make you the least among the nations," unquote. Furthermore, according to Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer chapter 23, the line in Malachi chapter 1 verse 6, a son is expected to honor his father and a servant his master, unquote, is interpreted as follows. When a son honors his father, all is well. If not, he will wind up as a servant to his master. Not found in my edition of the Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. In an alternate interpretation, the reason why Noah chose as punishment the person who witnessed his disgrace become a slave was that seeing he was the one who saw his state of nudity first, it was his duty to do what any servant would do, i.e., to cover his nudity. Seeing that he had neglected to perform the duty of a servant, he was now condemned to remain a servant all the time. This is also why he used the expression, quote, "a servant of servants," unquote, instead of simply, quote, "service" or "servant," unquote. Both Ham and his son Canaan were condemned to be servants to Ham's brothers. What caused him this terrible curse? It was all because he had shamed his father. As a punishment, in future, his descendants would be put to shame, as we know from Isaiah chapter 20, verse 4. Quote, "Just as my servant Yeshayahu had to go naked and barefoot, the captives of Israel and the slaves of Nubia, young and old, will have to go naked and barefoot," unquote. But Japheth, who honored his father, will be honored by God in the days of the wars preceding the final redemption, when God will reward him by humbling Gog and Magog and by covering the shame of Japheth. Ezekiel 39 verse 11. He will also compensate Shem at the time when the two priests, sons of Aaron, prepared to offer their unauthorized incense in the temple, when only their souls were burned. But their bodies as well as their garments were left intact by the heavenly fire and were buried in a dignified manner. This was because they had also been descendants of Shem. Leviticus chapter 10 verses 2 to 7. Isn't that interesting? Okay. Another one, Rabbeinu Baya. According to the plain meaning of the text, Noah made the curse fit the sin of his son. He who had shamed his father by viewing his nakedness and not only not covering his father's nakedness, but calling in his brothers to show them that spectacle, in other words, making sport of his father, was cursed by becoming an object of derision as a punishment for having made his own father an object of derision. Shem and Japheth, who had covered their father's nakedness and put the blanket on their shoulders in a dignified manner, walking backwards, were rewarded by God in a manner fitting their sensitive conduct. Israel, the descendants of Shem, who later on received the Torah, were given the commandment of fringes, the tzitzit, on their garments as a form of distinction. The descendants of Japheth will merit proper burial at the time of the final war before the arrival of the Messiah, the war between Israel and Gog and Magog. Ezekiel chapter 39, verse 11 states, quote, I will provide a burial ground for Magog, unquote. This is his reward for his conduct of his father. Noah, although in the war under discussion, he attacked Israel. We know from chapter 10, verse 2, that Gomer and Magog are descendants of Japheth. From this entire episode, we can learn that when two people between them perform a single commandment, they receive a reward for having performed the entire commandment. Furthermore, the one who commenced the performance receives a greater reward. The Torah stresses the difference between the relative merit acquired by Shem and that acquired by Japheth in our episode of covering their father by not writing, quote, they took the garment, unquote, but by writing, quote, Shem and Japheth each took the garment, etc., unquote. The word is singular. This is an allusion that Shem made the greater effort of the two. The reward the reward of the mitzvah the reward of the mitzvah of tzitzit is greater than the reward of being allocated burial. We find a similar distinction between relative merits awarded for the performance of similar virtuous deeds when the Talmud in Sota 36 discusses the relative moral value of both Joseph and Judah sanctifying the name of the Lord. Joseph's deed performed in the privacy of Potiphar's house when he declined the efforts of Mrs. Potiphar to seduce him, quoting that it would be sinful against both God and her husband, was rewarded by God by having the letter He of the holy name of God added to his name. Psalms 81, verse 6. Judah, who sanctified God's name in public when entering the Sea of Reeds before it had been split, thus demonstrating his faith in God's forthcoming help, was rewarded by his name containing all the letters of the holy name of God. According to a Midrashic interpretation, the words Yud-He, quote, he will be for his brothers, unquote, means that 30 descendants will be descended from Canaan. Compare that with chapter 10, verses 15 to 18. Also, the standard compensation to be paid by someone who killed a Canaanite slave is 30 shekels of silver. Both these matters are alluded to in the word Yud-He in our verse. Yeah, very interesting. And so Jewish commentary, Siftai Hakamim, said the phrase, you caused me, this is proof for those who say Ham castrated Noah, for it is written, quote, cursed is Canaan, unquote. Why did Noah curse Canaan? Because Ham castrated Noah, who then said, you caused me, may your fourth son unquote. And the proof for those who say he sodomized him is from chapter 9, verse 22. Ham, the father of Canaan, saw. And it is written in chapter 34, verse 2, she was seen by Shechem. Just as there Shechem had relations, so too here Ham had relations. If so, why did Noah curse Canaan? Because Ham did both. He sodomized him and castrated him. Tosafos explained in Sanhedrin chapter 70, verse 70a, that the reason Noah did not curse Ham himself is because it is written, Elohim blessed Noah and his sons in Genesis chapter 9, verse 1. And a curse cannot be effectuated where there is a blessing. You might ask, how did Ham know that Noah desired for a fourth son? The answer is, it is written, quote, he uncovered himself in his tent, unquote. It is read his tent, but it is written her tent. And Rashi explained there that that is in a reflexive form. Thus, the verse is saying that Noah acted with himself reflexive, as if he was engaged in relations with his wife, quote unquote, her tent, i.e. his organ had requisite, okay, a little bit graphic here. Ham thereby recognized that Noah desired a fourth son. All right. So that's pretty much it for the commentaries. So there's so much reference to, let me see here. There's so much reference to Genesis Rabbah, isn't it? I wonder if we can just jump on over there and take a peek at Genesis Rabbah. Let's take a peek at it here. Some reason it is kind of eluding me. Here we are. Genesis Rabbah, starting with 6. Yeah, so verse 6, this is Genesis or Bereshit Rabbah, chapter 36, verse 6. And Shem and Japheth took a garment. This is Genesis chapter 9, verse 23. Rabbi Yochanan said, Shem began the mitzvah, and Japheth came and listened to him. Therefore, Shem was granted a talit, and Japheth a phalium, a circumcision, and laid it upon both their shoulders, and went backwards and covered their father's nakedness. But it is written, went backwards. Don't we already know that they did not see their father's nakedness? This comes to teach that they covered their faces with their hands and walked backwards, giving him the respect due from a son to a father. Said the Holy One of blessing to Shem, you covered your father's nakedness. By your life I swear that I will reward you. When these men are bound in their cloaks, Daniel 3:21, Rabbi Yodan and Rabbi Huna disagree on what Beisar Belahon, tongue twister there, Beisar Belahon means. Rabbi Yodan said it means in their prayer cloaks, Rabbi Huna said it means in their robes of state. The Holy One of Blessing said to Japheth, you covered your father's nakedness. By your life, I swear that I will reward you, for it shall come to pass in that day that I will give to Gog a place fit for burial in Israel. Ezekiel 39:11. You know, I can't help but think about the concept that's talking about here, how someone can, like, you can do something now that can bless generations from now. Generations like your great, you know, grandchildren. It's just an amazing thought. The Holy One of Blessing said to Ham, quote, you brought your father's nakedness to disgrace. By your life, I swear that I will punish you. So shall the king of Assyria lead away the captives of Egypt and the exiles of Ethiopia, young and old, naked and barefoot, and with buttocks uncovered, to the shame of Egypt. Isaiah 22, verse 4. Genesis Rabbah 36, verse 7. And Noah awoke from his wine. He was sobered from his wine, and he knew that his youngest Canaan, son, had done to him. Here, youngest means his worthless son. Oh, okay, so according to Genesis Rabbah here, youngest doesn't literally mean youngest, but rather worthless. Isn't that interesting? Now, where do we go here? As you read, quote, because the brazen altar that was before Adonai was too small, katan, to receive the burnt offering. Would that be burnt offering? Misspelt there. 1 Kings 8:64. And he said, cursed be Canaan. Genesis 9:25. Ham disagreed. Rabbi Yehuda said, since it is written, quote, and God blessed Noah and his sons, unquote, Genesis 9, verse 1, while it cannot be a curse where a blessing has been given, consequently. He said, cursed be Canaan. Rabbi Nehemiah explained it was Canaan who saw it in the first place and informed them. Therefore, the curse is attached to him who did wrong. Rabbi Barakiah said, Noah grieved very much in the ark that he had no young son to wait on him, and declared, quote, when I go out, I will beget a young son to do this for me, unquote. But when Ham acted thus to him, he exclaimed, you have prevented me from begetting a young son to serve me. Therefore, that man, your son, will be a servant to his brethren. Unquote. Rabbi Huna said in Rabbi Yosef's name, Noah declared, you have prevented me from begetting a fourth son. Therefore, I curse your fourth son. Isn't that an interesting concept? You have prevented me from begetting a fourth son, therefore I cursed your fourth son. Imagine that. Rabbi Huna also said in Rabbi Yosef's name, you have prevented me from doing something that is done in the dark, therefore your seed will be ugly and dark-skinned. Rabbi Hiya said, Ham and the dog copulated in the ark. Therefore, Ham came forth black-skinned, and while the dog publicly exposes his copulation, Rabbi Levi said, this may be compared to the one who minted his own coinage in the very palace of the king, whereupon the king ordered, I decree that his effigy be defaced and his coinage canceled. Similarly, Ham and the dog, this is Yeah, it's getting a little bit graphic there, but this is in the ancient Jewish documents, Bereshit Rabbah. Bereshit Rabbah. So, or otherwise known as Genesis Rabbah. So a lot of the Jewish Orthodox Jewish rabbis quote that as we've read there. So that is all I'm. That'll wrap it up for the reading and the discussion on from those texts. Isn't that amazing? I mean, different points of view, different things that have been speculated on, and it seems like some of these rabbis talk like they know what happened. Other ones are talking more like, well, it's a speculation. So it's an amazing thought anyway. It's an amazing thought. So, what do you guys think? Let me know in the live chat. What do you think? What do you think about the story? And once again, Genesis is not very informative, especially in the first several chapters. So, Lord willing, tomorrow we'll get into Genesis chapter 10, and we'll begin the story of the city and the infamous Tower of Babel. Yeah, so isn't that something? For those of you who want to read up a little bit more on what I was just reading there, if you just go to sefaria.org, again, this is a Jewish website. That is sefaria.org. If you just go to Sefaria, and click on Tanakh, okay, and you'll see Genesis right there, and you can pick the chapter and verse, and then when you click on the verse, you'll get the commentaries at the side. Now, I just read a few of the commentaries. Now, you'll see a lot of them has the EN beside it. That means it's in English. If it doesn't have EN beside it, it's more than likely in Hebrew or some other language. So I just read some of the commentaries. We didn't read any of the Talmud or the Midrash about it or the Halakha. Look at how many other, even Second Temple. Even Philo. It's got Philo here. Midrash of Philo. Interesting stuff. So, yeah, amazing. What it says there in those old texts. Okay, let's see what we have here in the live chat before we call it a night. I understand this to be in context to the comment you were pointing out there earlier, Corey. Sorry that it doesn't seem like it showed up, so sorry about that. BB says, "Shalom, everyone, from my husband, Will Sr., who's at work now, but will be here soon, and myself. Blessings to you all. Thank you very much. And shalom, BB. Shalom to Will as well." Corey says, in my opinion, the reason Canaan took the curse because Ham saw Noah's nakedness, told about it, and Canaan went unto Noah. There you go. Lots of different, it's just fun, like, talking about it, thinking about it, speculating exactly what happened. But, all those different theories that I was reading there, and a lot of them, as you've heard, a lot of them kind of interweave with each other, but certainly interesting. Yeah, I've also heard that as well, Corey, that Noah's nakedness was referring to his wife and that as well. I heard that as well. Shayla said, you read good, Christopher, but I'll have to rewatch it because it went right over my head. All right. Don't blame you. I mean, there's a lot said there, and it can get a little bit confusing too, but it is something to think about. Even myself, I have to sit back and think, okay, so let me just kind of sort this out. This is what Canaan could have done, or this is what some people say he did. This is what other people say he did. So much there. But it is really why was it that Ham wasn't cursed? I think it's a valid point that Ham wasn't cursed because God already blessed him, and you can't curse anything that God blesses. But then again, what if that person repents from his righteousness and becomes a sinner? And does that mean, that takes you down a whole nother rabbit trail. Yeah, and it doesn't seem like Ham was Noah's youngest son either. So it's just amazing. Yeah. And it just goes to show, again, that Genesis is not very, it's very sparse. It's hard to make out a lot of this stuff and all the details. Once we get into the story of, Abraham and such, it gets more and more detailed, of course. And then going into the Jacob and his sons. Shanna says, sometime I'll have to rewatch this to soak in. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Shayla says, my brain has exploded. I have no comment. All right. Shayla says, thank you, brother. Thank you, Shayla. Blessings, blessings. And Corey says, another thought is, I didn't know that God will bless someone individually. I used to think one person was blessed. It was the whole bloodline. One person that was blessed. Yep. Excuse me. Baby says, thank you, Brother Christopher. Every day I learn more and more with your platform. I appreciate your readings each and every day. May Yod continue to bless you each and every day. Thank you very much, BB. I appreciate that. And blessings to you and Will as well. Really appreciate you. Okay, wrapping up for tonight. Tomorrow is kind of like we're just eclipsing the story of Babel, the Tower of Babel, and all of that stuff. So we'll be reading Genesis chapter 10, and we'll take it from there. So another very information-packed time, God willing. So by the grace of God, we'll do it. We'll do it. So thanks again, everyone. I appreciate y'all. Love you all. You guys are world changers. You guys are awesome. And so I'll see you again tomorrow, Lord willing. Alan says, thank you, brother. Much love and blessings to you all. Thank you very much, Alan. I appreciate that. Love and blessings to you as well. Billy says, good night, blessings, and shalom, everyone. Thank you, Billy. God bless you more. Tammy says, have a wonderful night. Oh, thank you, Christopher. Thank you, Tammy. You have a wonderful night as well. You and yours. Will says, late but here. Shalom and good night, everyone. Well, good to see you anyway, Will. Blessings, shalom, and good night. As always, I pray for each and every one of you that the Lord bless you and keep you, make his face to shine upon you, lift up his countenance upon you, and give you wonderful, wonderful shalom. Amen, amen. See you guys tomorrow.